Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Talkin' Ruggers, the show where we talk ruggers with everyone involved in the game who isn't only a current professional player. From content creators and online coaches to pundits and even other podcasters. Essentially, everyone involved in bringing our beloved game forward into the 21st century. We'll be delving deeper into the details of their stories, giving you professional advice on how you may be able to break into that industry within rugby for yourself, and ultimately be putting the rugby world to rights. And this week, we will be talking ruggers with one of the original rugby content creators. Yeah, I'm talking about one of the founding fathers. Him and his brother have used their rugby intellect over the course of more than 400 YouTube videos to amass an audience of over 250,000 subscribers. He has arguably one of the biggest, brightest, and best rugby brains our beloved game has to offer. You may know him as half of Squidge Rugby, but today we'll be talking ruggers with one of the brothers behind the brand, Will Owen. Very quickly, before we dive into this one, if you could do me one very small favor before listening, just go down and drop a like or a 5-star rating on this episode of the podcast and the podcast as a whole, or whatever platform you may be listening on. It just helps us out to reach as many people with these episodes as possible. I love bringing them to you. And if you think a friend might enjoy them too, then please feel free to share it amongst your rugby community. We're trying to get through over 115 guests on this podcast, so there's a long way to go yet. So we hope you guys enjoy the journey. Without any further ado, let's get straight into this episode. I hope you enjoy. Okay, Will, a lot of people know you as Squidge Rugby, but for those who don't, describe what you do for a living.
Yes, so I am one half of Squidge Rugby. Myself and my brother Robbie do a YouTube channel, which I suppose is an attempt to try and understand an impossible to understand sport and try and break it down for fans of the sport, pre-existing fans of the sport, and try and point out a few things that they may not have or may have noticed on a rugby pitch and break them down in, I'd say, a slightly silly sort of a way, because rugby's a crazy sport and I think it deserves to be treated as such.
It is crazy and complicated, for sure. And to bring that fun side of things as well just keeps things engaging along the way. Like, who wants to take it too seriously? But that rugby experience that you've generated over the course of years to be able to talk about the game in the way that you do, where did that start for you?
So my first experience with rugby was in 2004. Me and my brother got pulled out of school on a Friday afternoon and taken down to the Principality Stadium to watch Wales play against Japan. And Wales won that game 98-0. And Gavin Henson got 100% of his conversions that day. So at that point, I was not interested at all. Like, I'd grown up with rugby around the house. My dad was really interested, like really into rugby. We'd always hear him shout at the telly and kind of like take the mick out of him that way around and just say like, oh yeah, the rugby's clearly on, whatever. But I wasn't interested for another few years. It wasn't until Wales won the 2008 Grand Slam, the Six Nations. And at that point, basically, our parents forced me and my brother to watch it because it was a much more interesting hobby than whatever it was we were doing at that point. And we'd never grown up as sporty kids. We were never interested in any sports growing up. And then sitting down with the 2008 Six Nations kind of really helped with that. And then it just kind of snowballed slowly but surely from there. And it reached a point where we'd watch all the Wales games, and then we'd watch all of the Wales clubs games, so all the Ospreys, Cardiff, Dragons, Scarlets games. And then it very gradually snowballed into just like any rugby that was on telly. We would watch it. We would learn every single player, learn how every team likes to play, who all the referees and the coaches are, the commentators and everything. And we just started to, really kind of like, nause out on it and obsess over it and be proper nerds about it. So it started in 2004 with watching Wales win, which ironically made me think that Wales were the best team in the world for a few years. And then it wasn't until I watched Wales play the All Blacks in 2008, which was the closest they've come since the 1950s to beating the All Blacks, and made me realise that, oh, wait, no, New Zealand are the good team, aren't they? Not Wales, never mind. And my dreams were crushed and they've never been repaired since.
And it seems like they're getting only worse as time seems to
Yes.
go on, peaking, well, maybe
Anyway,
over a
this has been a
decade ago
great
now.
podcast. It's
Yeah.
such a shame we have to end it there.
Oh, God, just raging away right now. But it sounds like you've been a top Nause since birth. At any point, did you strap on the boots as well, you and your brother?
Yeah, so my brother played for a couple of years when he was sort of, I think between the ages of about 14 and 16. So I started, and again, like neither of us had ever played a sport before at this point. So the level of natural talent between us is minimal, to say the least. But I started playing when I was about 13, I want to say, and I still play to this day, which is something I love. I've never enjoyed playing rugby more than I do at the moment. So I joined a team called Nottingham Corsairs, who I didn't quite realise at the time were like the best team in the area. I just joined because my mate was playing for them and I didn't know who else to join, and I wanted to start playing rugby. And I remember going to sleep the night before my first training session and like envisioning like me in the anthem line for Wales at the Principality Stadium and thinking one day this will happen. And then I rocked up and literally the first thing I saw was our fly half like kicking the ball about 50 meters and thinking like, oh wait, I thought 13-year-olds couldn't do that, and seeing him absolutely spin the ball miles and like perfectly accurate. And we did a sprint training thing at the start of training and I was one of the slowest players, and all of these things adding up, and I was like, yeah, maybe I'm not entirely cut out for this, but I'll stick at it because I want to be good at this. So I played at Nottingham Corsairs and I was the worst player. Like, and I'm not just saying that to be kind of self-depreciating. Like, I could not catch a ball. I could not tackle. I was admittedly never really coached those things. I think it was just kind of accepted that I just couldn't do that. And it's just like, we'll just stick him on the wing so he's out of the way, rather than necessarily, right, let's improve these core skills because then we can build like a rugby player out of that. So I was just kind of left to rot and be a spare part on the wing. So I played for them for 2-3 years, and then our team folded and I signed for another team that my mates played at the time called Long Eaton Rugby Club, who turned me into a functional rugby player that I am today. I wouldn't go as far as good, but I would definitely say functional. But yeah, I still play for Long Eaton to this day, and it is my favourite rugby club in the world. Whenever people ask me what club I support, I will say Long Eaton. I support Long Eaton and Wales. They're my two teams. But yeah, and I love it. I still play for their second team to this day, and I coach our Colts team there as well, which is super exciting. So yeah,
I have this image in my head of the superhero who has like the super brain powers. I know like flight powers or super speed or strength, but they use their brains to navigate the world and find tactical advantages over other people. And I find myself doing that because, much like yourself, I'm analysing every piece of rugby I ever watch. I don't think I've ever sat and watched a game in a long while without really just sitting there. I was even in Melbourne for the Lions' second test, and I was sat there. I weren't cheering very much, just watching and analysing. And how do you think that influences how you play the game? Do you reckon that gets in the way? Because I find myself overthinking at times, trying to play this idealistic brand of rugby. But in reality, sometimes, as you learn the hard way, all that matters is going forwards. And if someone's bigger than you running at you, that's who's going to win at the end of the day. How does that work for you?
100% it has an influence on it. I think first and foremost, like, again, like growing up not being that good at rugby and not being athletically gifted, let's say, I did for a large part of my career like quite struggle with my confidence on the pitch. But nowadays I think I'm kind of over that hump thanks to the fact that I do this as work. And I think the fact that a lot of people in my team kind of recognize that and will come to me for advice on sort of tactics and so on, which is really nice. And because a lot of them know more than I do, or as much as I do at the very least, but that definitely helps from that perspective. But actually kind of the one thing that's most helped my game out was, so I play as a scrum half. I always wanted to be a scrum half when I was growing up. It was always the position that I kind of like idolized and wanted to be. And then, after being stuck out on the wing as a spare part, after moving to a new club, they kind of went, okay, I think we can turn you into a decent scrum half. And they worked at that. And now it's the only position I play now. Like, unless there's a major struggle in somewhere in the inside backs, but maybe not centres, because can't deal with the physicality for that. As a 9, the thing that really helped my game out was analysing Jameson Gibson Park, so the Irish 9 who plays at such an insane speed. And the thing that I noticed about him when he first came through, it's a little bit less true of him these days, actually. He's kind of evolved his game a little bit. But when he first signed for Leinster and his first couple of years there, he had this habit of never sniping, where he would just get the ball as fast as he could to the pod out there, because all the congestion was actually around the breakdown. So he didn't want to attack that area. He wanted to move people from there to be further out, to tire the team out. And actually, it made me view the scrum half position slightly differently. It made me realise, like, oh wait, the scrum half is the pacemaker of the team. You know, I think I tried too much to like be a quarterback and have everything revolve around me. Whereas actually, I play in a team whose attack is brilliant, who we love to keep the ball and just like run at teams and make them tackle us and tire them out that way. And it made me realise that my role as a 9 is to almost like be invisible, to not be noticed, and to just chuck the ball to the next pod and just go from there and kind of just set the tempo. And watching James in Gibson Park and doing like proper analysis on him kind of made me realise, like, oh, I need to completely change the way I play, because at the moment, you know, sure, I make the odd break in training, but it's not actually that helpful for the team.
That is a fascinating point, talking away from your playing experience and looking at the likes of Jamison Gibson Park and his rivalry now with the likes of Antoine Dupont, as everyone
Yeah.
always loves to mention, but even Cam Roygard in that sense, and perhaps
Yeah.
how he is overshadowed even potentially by both of them, because he is the person pulling the strings, the guy behind the scenes that you don't notice doing those flashy things. Yeah, he can throw a flat cut-out pass, miss out 5 attackers and hit the 6th man on the edge. But other
Yeah.
than that, he's just a man setting the tempo. It's those things that set the rhythm of the game that you don't really notice because the trumpet's blaring louder than everything else, if that makes
I'd
sense.
100% say Roygard would be like the 3rd best scrum half in the men's game for me. Like, he's such a good, with apology to Maxime Luku, like, I love watching that guy play.
He is brilliant. But it's fascinating going back to you with your rugby playing and how players can learn from watching other people on TV, and you can pick those certain players that are your favourites, but taking it into your own game, how have you found that, especially from a coaching point of view, where you have all this database of knowledge and information, but you're playing with people who may potentially not really even be able to catch pass that well? I know that even in
Yeah.
my team at times we struggle, even if it's not catch pass skills, everyone's stood too flat and they've got no time to make their catch pass skills any easier for themselves. Is it frustrating at all because you want to have this ideal image in your head, or does it turn out like you're playing with some junior All Blacks here and they're all just catch pass brilliant?
It can be a bit of both, but I tend not to get too frustrated because I know I was once that guy in the team who everyone kind of groaned at because I dropped the ball for like the 10th time in the session. So I have like a decent level of patience on that. And especially when I'm coaching, you know, I'm very much of the opinion that if a player I coach makes an error, then that's not a bad thing, you know, that it's inevitable. It's something that if it wasn't going to happen then, it was going to happen another time. So it's not my place to kind of go, oh, well, what are you doing kind of thing? Because, yeah, if you weren't going to make that error then, you weren't going to learn from it then. So you're going to do it further down the line at a senior game, potentially when there's something on the line, whatever, you know. So with that in mind, you know, as I say, I've got a decent bit of patience, but yeah, no, I definitely do apply that maybe a little bit too much to my coaching and so on, because with that, what I often like to do is like, if we have a move that we're doing, for example, that we're introducing, I will often be able to remember a time that professional team has run that move or a move similar to that and bring that up and be able to break it down for the lads and kind of like point out, right, so this player then goes here and does this and whatever.
People love set piece, those idealistic patterns and moves that you can run where you have the most controllable image in front of you. Like, of course,
Yeah.
you're typically going to be met with a fly half inside and outside centre, an open side wing, potentially half sat, and then the fullback closing the gate. That's the only time you realistically have that clear picture in front of you. So making the most of that is a number one opportunity to play idealistic rugby in that sense, where you
Sure.
go about it with your direct intention. But then in reality, rugby's a chaotic game. It's a chaos sport. After that phase, who knows where everyone's going to be? It's not like football where you typically resort back to your set positions. You try and find that degree of familiarity within a shape and a system so that you're one step ahead of the defense who has to respond to you. But in reality, rugby's a chaotic game. And it's not just around tactics and strategy. There's also that skill element where if I can put a bit of footwork on and get an offload in behind you, that's actually what's going to break the defense apart. And then the layers of shape can come on top of that. And you can
Sure.
make rugby as technical or as enjoyable as you want to be. In our case, by the sounds of things, it's both. But on that theme, what is your most enjoyable rugby memory away from all the shape and all the tactics? Just something that you just loved. Have you ever won a trophy, a tour away?
To be honest, I would genuinely say that the most I've ever enjoyed rugby is at the moment. So honestly, like most of last season, there was also a time when we put 80 points on our local rivals Ilkeston. So that definitely comes up in the list as well. But yeah, I think last season was great. I think one of my favourite memories was, so the Colts that I coach at the moment, I've taken them up from being under 9s and 10s. And the ones who were under 9s are now like senior Colts, so starting to play senior rugby this season. But the ones who were under 10s when I started playing senior rugby last season. So that was definitely a really amazing moment. There was a game we had last season where I was actually bizarrely in a very unfortunate series of events playing 10 instead of 9, which makes me very uncomfortable, and especially the thought of kicking. But there was one game where I think about 6 or 7 of them made their senior debuts in that game, and playing alongside them and a couple of them scoring, it was really great. But then just the whole season last year with the second team that we've had, we finished second in the league, but we put 70 points on top of the league in the last game of the season. So this year we are really going to go after it and try and do our best to get towards that top spot. And yeah, I've never enjoyed playing rugby more than I do at the moment. And it's weird because like I have so much involvement in rugby, but at the moment playing is the thing that I enjoy the most.
Sounds like promotion to me. Here we go. Long
Touch
Eaton are
wood.
going up. You heard it
Yeah,
here first.
we've got a
Come
long
on,
way
the
to
boys.
go, but yeah,
Yeah, our whole
I'm
season
very
ahead of us.
excited. Yeah, and we've got a great group of lads that love playing with.
I've got to
so-
know, do you ever get any like smack talk from players in games? I know whenever I play a game and I've done the game day vlogs, for example, I suppose that's your one mitigation because you're not trying to post highlights on the YouTube channel. But I'll get someone
Not
who
yet.
yeah, not yet. Soon comes Squidge game day vlogs. But I remember I played where were we? Oxford Brooks, of course. Brooks, not books, as they say down in that part of the world. But I got dump tackled on my head. And the bloke got up and stood over me and said, "Level that up, mate." And I was like, oh, God. Fair
Decent
play. That's a
chat.
bit of
It's
good. That's
decent
good
chat.
chat. That I'll give you that. But honestly, I didn't enjoy it. I had his number after that because I was a bit annoyed. But has that ever happened to you, or people pretty friendly?
Yeah, it has. It definitely has happened. Only a couple of times. It kind of, I guess, in this scenario, it's one of the rare situations where it helps that I'm the lesser known face of Squidge. That it's a common misconception that Squidge is one person, but it has happened before. But usually it's not led to particularly good chat. Like you can tell when somebody's not like a big fan. It's almost like a big fan and like quoted something really specific. I would really rate that. But it's just kind of been like, oh yeah, can't wait to see that in your analysis or something like that. And it's just like, yeah, well, you know, whatever. It did once happen where in a pre-match coin toss, I kind of shook the opposition's captain's hand and kind of said like, "Oh yeah, Will, nice to meet you." And he was like, "Yeah, I'm actually a really big fan." And I was like, "Oh, that's nice." But also, we're about to play rugby, and I half want to sledge you right now. I half want to go to the mode. Like, "Oh, thank you, that's really nice." But no, it turned out he was a really nice guy, and it was luckily only a friendly game rather than like, you know, some top of the league clash. So he ended up being a nice guy and a pretty decent player. And I mean, they ended up winning the game, and we got a photo afterwards. It was all lovely. But there've been a couple of moments like that where people have come up to me after games and said, you know, not doing anything during the game, but then after the game said that they really like the channel or whatever. And that's happened a handful of times. But in terms of sledging, it's much more from my own teammates rather than necessarily oppositions.
As it should be, I suppose. Yeah, that is what rugby's all about. Good to know that you're not getting too much abuse, just the standard chat, you know.
Again, not
Analyse
yet.
that one. Yeah, not yet. Soon come. If we ever play against each other, mate, I'm going to give you the worst chat you've ever had. I can guarantee you that. That's a promise, mate. But that's hilarious.
We'll have to drop down a few divisions, but yes.
Maybe a little bit. I'll come play some village rugby with the boys. What league are you in? What standard are you playing at?
So our first team are in level 5, but I'm in the second team.
Oh,
I've
cool,
never
cool.
played first team. So we are in, I want to say level 8 or 9, I want to say. And I will say now, like, there's a lot of people who in past are, you know, a little bit touchy about like playing in the first team, second team, whatever, or like wanting to play at a certain standard, right? I am so secure in the fact this is the best standard of rugby I've ever played. And if you told 14-year-old me who couldn't catch or pass a ball or make a tackle or anything like that, arguably I still can't do one of those three things now. But if you told me at that point that like I'd be playing at this standard in a really attacking team and playing as a scrum half and, you know, doing the things that I do to try and help the team win, I would be unbelievably proud of that. So it's one of those things that, like, sure, I never got to pull on the red jersey and play for Wales or do any of that, but I absolutely love the standard of rugby I play at the moment. And honestly, like, the lower levels of rugby like rise all the time.
That is music to my ears, mate. I am so happy to hear that, because there's so many people that I know around my age who, yeah, start to drop off playing rugby. It's not worth getting battered and bruised every weekend. You know, you're committing to training on a Tuesday and Thursday, and it sometimes can take the fun out of it. But it's brilliant to hear that you're just loving playing, especially as someone who's so involved in the game. I remember speaking in the past with Dan Cottrell, his name is, for Rugby Coach Weekly.
Yeah, I know
And
Dan,
he mentioned how difficult to really improve with your coaching. I think it feels obvious when I say it, without coaching a lot. You can come up with all these ideas in your head, and if you don't actually go out and practice them, then you can sometimes start to find yourself going down a bit of a rabbit hole of all these concepts in your idea without actually practically applying them.
Yeah.
Which is a conversation I want to come back round to later on. But I wanted to progress on your story first and foremost about any notable figures you had through your upbringing. Of course, by the sounds of things, you were a Nause out the womb, but was anyone who was really inspiring that for you, or was it all just self-generated?
Yeah, I think there's a handful of players that I really kind of like had my eyes on in my youth. There's Shane Williams was my favourite player as a kid. Like, he was the first player that I kind of like gravitated towards and absolutely fell in love with. Him and Tommy Bowe at the Ospreys were two like players that made me like fall in love with the game. And, you know, Tommy Bowe in particular was a great personality as well as being a great rugby player. And Jerry Collins, when he played at the Ospreys as well, was somebody that made me realise like what rugby players can be like. And, you know, he was incredibly cheeky and all that sort of thing. In terms of scrum halves as well, I loved watching Khan Fotuali'i when he played at the Ospreys. I'm naming a lot of Ospreys here, but they were the first team I kind of supported. I now support all of the Welsh teams as well as Long Eaton, but the Ospreys were very good in that era. Ruan Pienaar in his time at Ulster as well was somebody that I really gravitated towards. He was the first scrum half I noticed who kind of taught me what game management was. He was a proper kicking nine and had a huge boot on him, and he also played 10 and scored drop goals and winning penalties against the teams I supported, like left, right and centre. And he was a really inspiring player to watch to me because he kind of taught me what game management was in a way. Yeah, a handful of players like that. Reece Priestland as well. He was a player growing up that he was kind of taking the Welsh 10 shirt, and I loved watching him play because, again, if Ruan Pienaar taught me what game management was, Reece Priestland taught me what attack management was, and the way that he kind of got his pack into shape and so on. Yeah, I think watching a lot of those players, luckily Wales were quite good when I was growing up, so managed to teach me a bit of that the easy way. But yeah.
Those are the days, eh? I was literally making a video the other day, as we always seem to do, you know, always on the content production machine. And I was actually going back through old footage of Wales to find a video of Scott Williams.
Oh, yes.
And I was just looking back through the archives between like 2011 and 2013 and watching the 2013 side, of course, when a lot of them went off to tour with the Lions. And it was just Wales were a different breed back then. I remember they still couldn't quite manage to beat the All Blacks, but you watch the back line and you're there like, oh my God, that's dangerous. And then I feel like the evolution of rugby really occurred around the 2015 World Cup, moving through to 2016, where shape became a whole lot more significant. And the brilliant skills and the power of the Welsh backline with their set piece up front as well seemed to fall off a little bit. And that then leads us forward to today. Is that what you kind of see is happening? Give me your insight. Give me your take on why Wales, as a Welsh fan, have somewhat declined over the past few years.
I think it's largely what you were just saying about we had this golden generation come through, and then like we developed all of our good players at once in a way, and there's all sorts of union issues and stuff that you can get into which are extremely valid. But I think on the national level, like a big part of why that's all happened is you get to the 2023 World Cup, and after that you look at the players that you've lost who were generational, like Dan Biggar retires, Justin Tippett retires, Alwyn Jones retires, Jonathan Davis retires. Obviously, Jamie Roberts had retired a few years before that. Lee Halfpenny had gone. George North had gone. You know, you look at all of these, like there's an endless production line of just like, that was a world-class team that Wales had. And unfortunately, they all kind of disappeared at once. And suddenly you're relying on somebody to step up and be that leader. And Wales have found Jack Morgan, who's done that, who has been utterly brilliant for Wales in the last few years. You couldn't have asked anything more of. But outside of that, there's a handful of brilliant players like the Derry Lakes, the Thomas Williamses, and so on, right? But, it is really difficult to kind of transition the entire team at once. And I think that's where Wales have really kind of struggled on the men's national level.
Yeah, you're not wrong. There was a golden generation, and it was
Yeah.
always, well, a delight to watch and also a horror to watch, because I remember the Six Nations Grand Slam match between England and Wales where I was there, ready, started screaming on the sofa, and we lost by like 30-odd points.
30 points to 3, yes.
Yeah, I'm very well aware.
Yeah. 16th of March 2013, yeah.
God, there it is.
Day.
You had to rub it in, don't you? You're just an absolute walking encyclopedia. So let's take that forward, shall we? You've talked all about how you've had this passion and insight for the game from a very young age. How did that then bring you forward to today, where you have this YouTube channel with a whole load of subscribers, people who are tuning into your videos every single week? You've got the podcast going as well. You've grown into other areas of media. How did we get from you loving the game to actually baking it into a business?
So my brother actually started Squidge Rugby on his own initially. So he was working a sort of 9-to-5 job at the time, and he quit his job and gone on to kind of like, the dole essentially. And he had this idea in the back of his mind, but he then turned up to a job interview, which the job centre had kind of like told him to. And he really didn't want this job. He was like, I'm going to give it one more week and then I'm going to start this because I'm just waiting on some parts to arrive to allow me to produce this first video or whatever. And essentially they said to him, well, you're the only person to have turned up to this interview, so well done, you've got the job. And he was like, what? I don't want this job. And then he had to work for a delivery company for like 3 weeks. And then eventually he managed to got to the minimum amount of time he could have worked for it before handing in his notice. He did that, quit the job, and then started the first ever Squidge Rugby video. So he actually did the first couple of years of it on his own. So it was his own production. So he's kind of, he's the reason why it blew up essentially, because he spotted the gap in the market. He had the idea, and most of all, he had the balls to go for it because, most of us could have had that idea but not executed it well or bothered to actually follow through with it. Robbie's an extremely good script writer. It's kind of the biggest kind of feather in his cap, I'd say. He's a brilliant script writer. And that, I think, really propelled it forward and made Squidge Rugby a really kind of unique product at the time. It's something that I still really, really envy and wish I could do as well as he does. But Squidge Rugby then kind of ballooned off the back of that. It then came to the 2019 World Cup, where Robbie was going out to Japan on his own and travelling around Japan and watching as many games as he could. Meanwhile, I was sat at home on the sofa watching every game, getting up at 3 a.m. and God knows what time to enjoy the games like that. And he said to me, look, could you help me with analysis for this? With each game, could you just note down anything you spot? Because we'd had a lot of conversations before about, oh yeah, this thing's going on, this thing's going on. And we'd had a lot of things we agreed on, a lot of things that we disagreed on. I think Robbie then took that as oh wait, it means we're seeing different things, but we're on a similar wavelength. And we definitely bring very, very different perspectives. The fact that I play, obviously, on the weekends, so there's a lot of things that I pick up, from training and learning from the coaches and so on. And, Robbie's got a very analytical mind himself. Robbie very much, we both do. We both kind of view rugby as a science more than a sport, I think. But I think Robbie's always kind of had that ingrained in his brain, which is really useful. So we have two quite different perspectives on it. So Robbie asked for a bit of help with the analysis, just as a part-time thing. And I did that whilst working at a post office, just on the side. So that was a really casual thing. It wasn't a full-time role at the channel or anything. Fast forward a few months, maybe a year, we started doing podcasts together, the Squidge Rugby World Cup retrospective, where we look back on every Rugby World Cup game ever played, and we got through 3 World Cups there. We did 2011, 2007, 1987, and then we got halfway through 2014 Women's World Cup, but that a lot of work's got in the way. We are intending to return to that, but yeah, we did that. So that was kind of my first involvement in the channel, really full time, I guess. Then after that, I started doing some work doing analysis pieces for Rugby Pass Plus, and then as time went on, Robbie realised I cannot do this channel on my own anymore. It is too much. It's too much to do. There's so much work goes into it. I need you to come and work for me. And I thought, not a problem. And now we're realising it's probably too much work for 2 people, but We make do because the two of us work incredibly hard at it, and we both love it. And yeah, so it's a family business. I got into it a slightly slow way around, but I think we both always knew that we'd bring different things to the analysis, and so that would make it weirdly work as a team effort.
Yeah, two super minds, two super rugby brains dissecting everything. And when you have that many thoughts about a game and there's so many games in a season, yeah, the workload starts to pile up as the content machine churns out all these videos. I don't know how many videos you must be up to by now, but I can't believe how many you guys managed to cover. And honestly, like, I have a bit of a confession on my side.
Yeah.
You mentioned Robbie's script writing. I remember when I first started Level Up Rugby, I couldn't believe how well he executed what he was saying in his videos.
Yeah.
And I was there like, oh my God, how? Because I wanted to script write mine as well. Not script write them, but like I wanted to say certain points, but I didn't know how he said them so clearly. And I literally dropped him a message. If you go back through the DMs between Level Up Rugby and Squidge Rugby, way back, it must have been 6 years ago now, just
Wow.
asking how do you go about doing it. Never got a response, so screw you, Robbie.
Oh, that's not surprising.
Never meet your heroes.
No. If only you knew I was on the scene back then, maybe I'd...
Oh,
in
God,
fact,
maybe.
no, I probably couldn't have been much help with script writing.
Yeah.
It's funny because I've done it for a handful of videos on the channel before. I remember the first couple that I did, I look back on now, like, they're terrible. There was one I did for... It was Australia-South Africa in the Rugby Championship this year. And that one came out, like, it just all natural. I was just literally, that game finished and I got the tram to go to the office. I was literally writing it like that on my phone, just like as I was going. And that one, I think because it was just so like word vomit, that one turned out all right. But yeah, no, I don't know how Robbie does it on the weekly basis and churns out 2 or 3 of them sometimes in a week. It's crazy, but very, very impressive. So I do very much envy that.
Yeah, I can't believe it because I've got a degree of appreciation for the content production world, but I want to delve a little bit deeper into this from a more professional point of view, from a business stance. As you said, like he's literally employed you. You got to the status of organization now. So talk me through exactly what your job role, in inverted commas, is for Squidge Rugby and how you work on a day-to-day basis, what kind of responsibilities you're covering.
I think actually my official job title is nerd. I think I asked for that. But no, in terms of what I cover on the day-to-day, so analysis is the big one. I think that's the one that I take the most pride in, is analysing games and trying to spot things and watching them back 3, 4, 5 times sometimes and figuring out what on earth is going on in this sport. But as well as that, I think, so yeah, Robbie, when we've done the analysis either together or separately and sent notes to each other or whatever, then Robbie will write the scripts. Sometimes I help out with the script, or I add jokes in, or suggest, oh yeah, definitely put this analysis bit in, or make this remark or whatever. Sometimes I'll throw in like stuff like that, but I leave 95, if not more, % of it to Robbie. Then Robbie will churn that out. We'll record the voiceover. Again, 99% of the time it's Robbie does the voiceover. Sometimes, very occasionally, I've done it in past, but that's a rarity. And obviously this is different from the studio video, but I'll get into those in a moment. Then the audio I will edit. So the reason why he talks so insanely fast is because I'm editing out all of his pauses. Everybody ats him for that, saying, can you talk a bit slower? But it's the house style of how the videos work.
And what's even worse about that is when you guys put like little captions on the screen.
Yeah.
I used to literally stop the video and read all of them because I'm just obsessive like that. I'm so slow at reading as it is. Like I had to read every single little joke, but now I'm here like, oh God, there's so many of these. You have such like, it's like the little Easter eggs you leave hidden in these videos, in these texts. It's brilliant.
That makes me feel good that people are stopping and reading them, because it takes a couple of minutes of your time to put those in, because then the other part of the process is the editing the videos, which is the longest part for sure, because every single clip that goes in there is manually inserted and we have to go and pick out the right clip and so on. And sometimes a big part of the job is remembering, if Robbie mentions the fact that, Antoine Dupont, who can kick off his left foot, I have to remember the fact that in the 66th minute of the Six Nations game against England in 2022, Antoine Dupont kicked a 50-22 off his left foot. You know, like stuff like that. 2023 actually. But yeah, I have to remember that stuff like that happened, and remember like, oh yeah, this person scored against this team in this World Cup or in this Six Nations or Rugby Championship or whatever. So that is kind of, in a way, the most challenging and most impressive, and I guess maybe the most underappreciated part of the job is that, you know, you have to find those clips yourself, and 9 times out of 10 you can just remember them. And sometimes it happens that Robbie and I will just say to each other, can you think of an example of Ronan Kelleher scoring from a maul? And then Robbie will go, yeah, he did it against the Scarlets in round 4 in 2024, whatever.
It's, again, a different way of watching the game. Like, you can go as a fan, you can go as an analyst, but then you also can go as a content creator. And I know for sure, when I've been watching the Red Roses play recently, I've seen their attacking shape come together, and they've thrown the ball around, and all of a sudden, like, they might get so close to the try line or knock it on or get into touch or something. And I'm like, damn it. If only they'd scored that, and I could make a whole video out of it. But otherwise, it will just get lost because it will never be in the highlights reels because it was never a try. Because rugby seems to have a problem with making good highlight reels nowadays.
That is true. Yeah.
Never makes the good bits of play, and it's only ever the scores. Anyway, that's a separate bit of frustration that I have. But yeah, you start to watch the game differently, analysing it on your side of things, not just from the point of view of like actually constructing a video, but finding the clips. And then, as we both know, if we ever struggle to find a clip, there's one man that we can always rely on. The GOAT, for sure. Tell me who he is.
Andrew Ford, who I absolutely love that man. So, funny story I actually tell you about this. So, I mean, first and foremost, Robbie and I regularly in the office, if we're struggling for something, we'll just say to each other, like, Andrew Ford's pulled through. Like, we found the clip and, you know, we'll say in a video, oh yeah, Santiago Arata's been brilliant recently. And then we'll type him into YouTube, and Andrew Ford's done a video on him invariably.
For those who don't know at home,
oh yes,
I don't know if I'd be surprised if you don't know or be surprised if you do know, because I think a lot of people watch all his videos without actually realizing, because it's not YouTube like channel name Rugby Highlights. It's just Andrew Ford. It's just his name. So it's not exactly what you'd expect. But if you've ever seen Alassana Tuolangi highlights reel from back in 2012, or any sort of highlights reel, whatever, of the nichest rugby moments, it's most certainly been produced by a man named Andrew Ford. So if you're ever looking for a bit of highlights to watch on the weekend, go check him out, because it's unreal content. And this guy has a catalogue of content in his head. He just knows any moment. I even messaged him the other day because I was thinking about him, and I saw, I can't remember who it was, but a prop called a mark in a game. I was like, oh wow, I'll do you a favor this time, mate. Here's a clip for you. But yeah, what a top bloke.
Because he's just a man from Wales who just does this kind of on his own. But he's incredible. His rugby brain is amazing, and he's so much more than the sum of his parts, because he just seems to remember absolutely everything. And also his care for growing the game and so on. Like, he's absolutely incredible. But there was a time a couple of weeks ago where in the New Zealand versus Spain game at the World Cup, there was a point where the New Zealand scrum half, Reece Lane, was pulling the ball back at the back of the ruck, and she was on her own try line, and she, with her foot, dragged it behind her goal line. Now, there's this law that is in play at all times where if the ball is on the try line, there is no offside line. So the opposition are allowed to just put the ball down. Come to think of it, it was the Spain scrum half, Ana Fernandez de Corres, rather than Reece Lane. Anyways, the Spain scrum half did that, and none of the New Zealand players came and dusted it down. And we brought this up on one of our discussion videos where we, sit down, the two of us, and we'll talk and we'll throw in analysis bits. And Robbie brought up that nobody did this, and that this law was a thing. And I was like, well, it's hard to explain that law without some visual to go alongside it. And I then had to message Andrew Ford because I was really searching for videos. So I messaged Andrew and I was sort of like, mate, I'm absolutely scrambling here. You're the one person who can help me out with this. Can you remember any time that this law has happened? And within about 5 minutes, he responded with 5 times it happened. He was like, Ardi Sarve did it against the Hurricanes in 2018. Chris Henry did it against the Ospreys in 2016. And he was just like, there was loads of times that it happened. And I sent him that message and I was thinking, is he even going to understand what I mean here? Have I phrased this too badly? And straight away he knew. And yeah, it took him about 5 minutes and he had a load of times it happened. I don't know if he has them noted down or his rugby brain is just that incredible, but neither of them would surprise me, and they're both equally impressive.
Yeah, super niche reference this. It's like Sherlock's Mind Palace. Or when he came up against
Yes.
one of those villains who had like the glasses that everyone thought was full of database, but he was just had another mind palace. This bloke
Yeah.
has a rugby mind palace of memories on the wall.
It's the final boss, mate. It's the final boss.
Yeah, rugby final boss. But I remember, I swear it happened in an England New Zealand game at Twickenham. I'm convinced I can see that in my head. And if he needs a new clip, it happened in Sedbergh versus Clifton on the weekend that I was commentating on.
Mate.
And I was like, oh my God, it's happening. It's happening. So guys, basically what happened, I was like so excited that I knew the rule. I was like, oh, no offside in goal. And then every time that there's a goal line dropout in rugby, I always go to remind the referee, and then one referee clapped back at me. And I was like, wait a minute. He's like, because I take the goal line dropouts for my team, and I'll be like, lads, you can stand in front of me. Don't worry. There's no offside in goal. And
It's
the
true.
referee is like, there is for a goal line dropout. You have to be behind the kicker for a goal line dropout. I've never actually looked it up, so I don't know if he was just mugging me off, but
Sure.
rugby is a complicated game. It's full of all its difficulties because there's so many complicated things, and that's at the core of what you guys do in terms of breaking it down, making the game easier to see, making it more enjoyable to watch because people can see these sorts of things. But
Yeah.
what difficulties do you face on a day-to-day basis when making these videos? What are some things that people might not appreciate that you guys do that are actually really difficult? I've gone through the editing process and how
Yeah.
that can sometimes take the fun out of everything because it's so monotonous. You don't got into this job for being an editor. You want to just talk about rugby, but that in reality is probably what you spend most of your time doing. So what are some things that people don't realize are really difficult?
That's definitely the main one. Is editing is very time consuming, and obviously it's still enjoyable. I think the way that we try and make the videos makes it more enjoyable because we try and throw jokes in there, and we try and again like make it look a bit daft. And sometimes you use an example of like, oh, this person needs a support player, and at that point you can just put whoever you want in there. Like we had it with the Canada New Zealand video we did last week, and was saying like Emily Tatosi needs a support player here, and I put in a photo of Shania Twain next to her just as a Canadian woman who I knew was supporting Canada, and I put like DTH Van der Merwe next to her, just another Canadian that I could think of. I don't know, and it's just like stuff like that makes it definitely more enjoyable. I think the other one is we've had a lot of issues before with copyright, which makes things a lot more difficult. And in the 2023 World Cup in particular, that was kind of the low point because we were having to edit exclusively with stills and having to transition them to fade into each other like every couple of seconds. And making videos was just so not that enjoyable at that time. The editing the videos, like analysing it was brilliant because it was such a good World Cup, but it was one of those things that rugby definitely shot itself in the foot in that tournament and not allowing people to talk about it properly and really like, I guess, compromising the quality of stuff that was content that was being made around that World Cup. Luckily, I think they've sorted it out now because in this World Cup, it's been brilliant. As we record this, the Women's World Cup 2025 is still going on. So this World Cup has been really great. And on the most part, we have been able to use the right footage, aside from Sky NZ demonetizing our last video, which is very frustrating. But yeah, no, on the most part, we've been able to work with them now. So I think they have kind of realised, and there was a lot of controversy around the 2023 World Cup final video because that got pulled down within 12 hours of it going up. And that was kind of a video that we were really, really proud of. And then World Rugby straight away took that down and they got a lot of shit for it. And after that, I think they kind of, I hope at least they reevaluated it. And as I say, for this World Cup, there's been no trouble from them whatsoever, which I'm really grateful for.
The Women's World Cup does seem to be getting an awful lot of things right, especially from a broader marketing point of view. Look at the social media content that's coming out. Yes, it does divide opinion in some cases. Some people aren't the biggest fan of the TikTok dances, but I know for sure who is: the younger generation.
Yeah, the target audience.
Well, yeah, funnily enough, the target audience, people who we want to get involved in the game more so.
100%.
And genuinely, speaking to Duncan from Bump for Vintage about this, Apple used women's rugby to advertise the iPhone. I'm not sure if you saw that.
Yeah.
And it dawned on me, I was like, wait a minute, is there a world in which rugby becomes a women's sport like netball? I don't think it will ever be that divided. Of course, the men will always still play the game, but where it's seen as women's rugby first, because in reality, like, they are really the cornerstone of some stuff. And yes, there's this whole hype train around it. People are all aboard the hype train because we want to make the women's game as great as it is. But genuinely, taking away all the emotional hype that comes along with a World Cup, genuinely the product on the pitch is much, much, much improved, and everything going on around it is following suit, in my opinion.
one of my kind of hottest takes in the rugby world is that I think, and this is something that is very much a Squidge Rugby belief, but I think in my lifetime I can see women's rugby being more popular than men's rugby because they do much more in terms of marketing and so on to appeal to younger generations than men's rugby does. And there's this weird kind of thing around men's rugby where younger people aren't necessarily as catered for. Luckily, I think that landscape has changed in the last few years with like a lot of content creators coming out and appealing to that younger generation. There's some people doing some really great work around that. But I think that women's rugby does cater to that a lot more and is a little bit more inclusive in terms of trying to get people from all sorts of backgrounds in and using stuff like the TikTok dances and whatever, as you previously mentioned. Like, sure, some people think it's a bit cringe, but also, as you say, the target market, the people that you're trying to get into rugby who are younger will enjoy that. And they have a full life of loving rugby ahead of them and a rugby career potentially ahead of them. And if it helps people get into the game, then that is a great thing, you know? And the other thing about women's rugby is, so we recently did this work with Vodafone, who found this stat that 70% of people who have negative misconceptions about women's rugby have never watched a game before. And ironically, most of the people who will say, oh, I hate rugby, women's rugby, like, I don't think it's exciting. I think it's slow. I think it's boring. The people who don't watch it. And ironically, the same people who say, I don't like kicking rugby. Well, I've got some great news for you. There's less kicking in the women's game. And also, like, the ruck speed is way higher at international level. Like, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about them later on, but like the Canada team from the 25 World Cup are quicker than any team in men's rugby in terms of their ruck speed. And people will say like, oh yeah, well, my under 16 boys team could do that faster than them. Brilliant. Go watch them then. You know, as long as you're watching rugby, that's fine. Go and watch them. But Canada are playing at a faster speed than any international team I've ever seen before. And like, it's not just Canada. You can say the same of the Black Ferns, the Red Roses, of various teams in there. And yeah, if you want to see a fast and exciting game where there is a little bit less kicking, if that's not what you're into, and I love kicking rugby, right? But some people aren't into it, and sure, no worries. Women's rugby is right there in front of you if you want to watch it. They run the ball, they score tries out wide, they also score tries in close. They do all of the things that you want them to do.
Hear, hear. Dearly, dearly. I'm with you on that, honestly, because, yeah, I can see it from a marketing point of view. That's what I studied at university, and that's the lens that I look at things through, similarly to you from an analytical point of view. And in the past, in years gone by, and I think it's somewhat of an issue with, I suppose, society as a whole, especially around women's sport, is that in particular men, I feel like, get told, you have to watch this. It is interesting. I'm telling you it is. And that's like, no, what, screw you. Like, you're not going to tell me what to do, especially as a bloke. But I think the new perspective that they've put on things now, which is why it's genuinely working, is because they have that mentality of, we got something cool going on right now. We're making this cool. You look at the fashion around it in particular, the likes of RB Club coming up through the ranks now in terms of both men and women's sport, but also the likes of like Holly Aitchison doing, I don't know, like fashion stuff. It's not something that I'm super
Ellie
interested
Kildun
in
as well. Yeah.
Ellie Kildun's a great example. When she came out with the clothing line with Canterbury, she's just released a pair of personalised boots that people can buy now. She's an icon.
Have you seen the Irish
game.
fleeces that have been going around on like Instagram and TikTok from Anna McGann and Eve Higgins? Those go hard, man. Ireland have released this like line of like fleeces that went viral on TikTok, and that they had to then like release like a limited edition batch of them. And it's like a kind of like if you know type thing. But again, like that's gone really well.
And I can hear people now listening to this, like clenching and cringing because it's like, no, it's just all aboard the hype train. It's too wokey pokey. But genuinely, I see this as actually being good. Like, it's just good. The clothing that's coming out is good. The stuff that they're doing on social media, it may not appeal to everyone, but it's good. Like, they're growing the game.
It
And
appeals
they're
to a
not
market
saying
rugby's never tried to appeal to before, and it's working. Like, there are people coming in that otherwise never would have got into rugby, and so that's a good thing, right? We want to be an inclusive sport, and so that means we have to try and find areas of the game that rugby has never appealed to before, and the women's game's really going after that.
We are the inclusive sport. Like, name another sport where you have to be fit and athletic in all shapes and sizes. You know, people will say American football, but I'm pretty sure the offensive line and defensive line aren't the most, aerobically fit people, let's say. I don't
Sure.
doubt that they're powerful human beings, but they're not aerobic in the same way as a prop might be, having to cover yardage around a game. So we are
Yeah.
inclusive, and I feel that, again, irritates the old traditional people, but I think it's become a bit more balanced nowadays. I feel like it's a pendulum swinging from side to side, and about now we're finding ourselves in the middle ground where it's like, no, this is actually quite good. The product on the pitch has definitely improved. I remember when I spoke with Ellie Kildan, when I shot some content with her before, she was like, all people ever seem to mention is that my tries come from missed tackles, but missed tackles happen all the time in games. And I'm here like,
It's because she's stepping people.
yeah, it's a bit of both. Don't get me wrong, missed tackles happen, and I feel like you might even have stats on this, I don't know. But I feel like watching the women's game now, especially watching Canada going about their business with their pick and goes around the ruck when they're in the red zone. I don't know, is there a stat on tackle completion rate improving in women's rugby over the past few years? Because in my opinion, it's actually, yeah, I feel like a significant thing in making the game more enjoyable to watch.
I do think it's something that we, as particularly like male fans of the women's game, need to be less afraid to say that it, like, how far it has come on, and especially because like I was, as I mentioned for the podcast, watching the 2014 World Cup in the lead up to this one, and obviously like I watch a lot of women's rugby anyway, like outside of the World Cup, but watching that and going like, oh no, this was a lot slower. You know, the 2014 World Cup was a lot slower, but also it's the same if you watch a rugby game from like, I don't know, let's say 2015. And a rugby game from, say, I don't know, 1999, you know, a men's rugby game, that is, difference in speed and quality will be drastic. And that's not to take away from, like, watching that tournament. There are players you look at that who go, like, they're all-timers. Like, watching Katie Daly-McLean in her prime was incredible, right? And watching Sarah Hunter in her prime, phenomenal. Like, there are so many of these players that you look at and you're like, oh, no, they stand the test of time. And, like, I'd say we did a podcast on the 1987 Rugby World Cup, men's Rugby World Cup, the first ever Rugby World Cup that took place. And like, to sum it up and not beat around the bush, it was utter dog shit, the quality of rugby that was being played across the board there. And like, there's like this brigade of people say, oh, rugby was more skillful in my day. And it's sadly not true, you know, and that's not to say there weren't brilliant players in that, you know, like when I looked at Philip Seller and Michael Liner and Grant Fox and Buck Shelford and people like that, these are players that couldn't be replicated, who would stand the test of time. But also, like, tactics hadn't emerged that far, you know. There was times where people get up to the 22, then randomly kick the ball just because they wanted to and they didn't know what else to do. And they're just randomly giving, like, that is aimless kicking that people are claiming is happening these days because they just didn't know what to do. And players dropping the ball under no pressure and just not tackling because they couldn't be asked. And there were just moments like that all the way through the 1987 Rugby World Cup. And it was a really difficult watch getting through that entire World Cup because you'd get a few games, like the first few games, it's like, this is funny because it's just like piss about rugby, you know, and it's not that good other than like the top end players were all brilliant. And like, if you put them into like the modern environment, professionalism and everything, they would be really good, right? And they would stand the test of time. But also just like the quality of like game plans and so on wasn't really there. And so we were mainly just holding out for when dogs ran on pitches, which happened surprisingly often in the 1987 World Cup.
Oh, that is hilarious. And yeah, if you take a look at the way the women's game's progressing, if you compare the relative speeds at which it's improving, took the men's game a wee while to get to where we are right now. And if you look at the way that the women's team are playing the game, like, regardless of skill level in terms of catch and pass, like, I can literally see it. I've done videos on it where you can literally see their shape. And that ties me into a real interesting question I have for you. This is the one thing that I really did want to ask you.
Okay.
We're disembarking the hype train now. We're leaving the women's game to go on and continue. We'll come back around to it later on.
Yes.
But the main question I really wanted to ask you is that we see your analytical videos. You say this player's doing this for this reason, but for this decision making. Back in the day, they never really made those sorts of thoughtful decisions. But nowadays, you know, there's more educated rugby players out there. The question I have, and it links back to the fact that you're still playing the game, on how many occasions do you reckon you say, this player, oh, he's a smart player, he's intelligent, he did this for this reason, and then in reality, the person's actually just smashed a ruck because they're knackered, or they've just thrown a pass and didn't even know there was anyone out there? Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, what do you reckon the gap is between what you're saying the intention is and then the outcome of what the player is actually doing?
For sure, it does happen. I think the place where this is most susceptible is mauls. Like, when I analyse mauls, I kind of assume that everything that a big second row is doing in the middle of that is really calculated and deliberate. Think of it like a fly half, and I think in a lot of the cases that is true. Like if you look at like Eben Etzebeth or someone like that who's really nasty, but like is an incredibly intelligent rugby player. I think he's, trial and error enough because he's so experienced, how to get people off mauls and so on. But also sometimes it is just the case that somebody is just a big lad, a big unit, and just knows how to fend people off, And I think, again, ball carrying, that's a big one for forwards. But I think rather than necessarily it being like a deliberate thing they're calculating in their brains, I think they've just been coached well a lot of the time. So sometimes it's something as simple as like which way they fall on the ball so they don't get jackled, or so they can put in the ball in a more advantageous position for the 9 to play off. Like I think that like groundwork is such an important thing to analyze and interesting to analyze when it comes to like ruck speed for teams that play really fast. And mentioning Canada and so many others, like France men are really, really good at this, at getting Dupont as much time on the ball as possible. Players like Gregory Aldrich, who are brilliant at this. Like he is one of the best placers of a rugby ball on the floor that I've ever seen. And like 80% of that is down to the fact that his carrying is so unbelievable and that he gets himself in positions where he's basically impossible to turn over. And as I say, like, I think a lot of the times I can be guilty in videos of saying like, oh, he's deliberately running like this. And people will say, bro, it's not that deep. And I think both things are true. He's doing it deliberately because he's coached by it, but it's an instinct for him. It's not like he's thinking, I'm going to run over here so I can place the ball like this. He's just doing that because that's the way he trains,
100%. And when you see the macro tactics involved in the game, of course, a team has an intention of what they're trying to achieve, like that proactive thought, like we want to try and move the ball to space here.
Yeah.
And some occasions, I don't know, I'm not an international rugby player, but when I look up, maybe I've made a decision that turned out to be, yes, part of the strategy, but I was just there shit me pants because I was there like, oh my God, someone's flying at me. You know what I mean? You're never going to know these things unless you potentially have conversations with those players and potentially the coaches as well. Is that something you've ever been exposed to as a business? Have you guys managed to get into camps and talk to people? I know a long time ago, I'm pretty sure it was Robbie went into the Ospreys camp and played some video games.
Yeah. We did. We both went into the Ospreys and had a game of Mario and Sonic Rugby Sevens with them. That was a pretty bizarre thing. We've done a bit of that before. We've not kind of overdone it because, in a way, there's a part of like not wanting to set daylight upon Magic because those guys know so much more than we do, invariably. So in a way, there's a part of us that's like, what are we going to do to help them out, But also at the same side of it, we have got a very slowly progressing series of videos about where we go and ask them questions about certain topics of rugby. So we have a scrum video that we did with Tom Harrison, the English scrum coach, who was brilliant and he loves scrums. We did a line out one with George Cruz, former British and Irish Lions second row, who was really, really good value. We've got actually around the corner a box kicking one that we did with Ben Youngs, which is super, super exciting, which is a really good video. I'm really excited for that to see the light of day. I think that's the first time we've publicly announced that we're doing that. So there's a little exclusive for you.
Exclusive, here we go.
Yeah. So that should be out in the next few weeks or so, I think. But we recorded that a while ago, so we've probably been saying that for ages. But yeah, we've got odd bits like that, and we've had offers before and stuff that I think we definitely are interested in doing that kind of thing, but only if we can find an interesting and unique spin on it. I don't think we're the kind of people that should go into a camp just because of the fun of it, just for the sake of like, oh yeah, we worked with this team and did this, I think we want to find something unique, a spin that we can put on it. And there's definitely some ideas we've had up our sleeves before that we want to go into, but I won't let them loose too soon.
Oh, don't let the cat out of the bag. But yeah, it's important to go into these environments and learn as much as you can.
Yeah.
And yeah, see what the players are seeing, because we see the game usually from this bird's eye view. And that's the coach's box typically. But when these players are down there on the field, they may be seeing something completely different. Their decision-making may be different. And if that can sort of influence the content that we produce to make it more insightful for people in terms of how much they are trying to execute that strategy, or was that just them chucking the ball to the next man? But Tom Harrison is a brilliant story. If you don't already know it, like for people listening now, like a prime example, someone who gives me faith, who wants to be a coach or involved in the rugby community, because he was never that top England international player, but he's managed to learn the game inside and out. I don't know him personally, but he clearly knows what he's talking about enough to get a job working for the top of the game in England.
Yeah.
So it's a prime example of when you work on these sorts of things, you can find a new career in your life, as you've done, as Robbie's done. What advice might you have for someone who's looking to burst onto the scene of YouTube in the rugby space?
Personally, I think going against convention, like, don't let anybody tell you what script to follow, is kind of the big thing for me. That, like, when I started out, and even when I was doing like these analysis pieces for Rugby Pass and so on before I was full-time with Squidge, like, the thing, I never wanted to just be seen as a journalist. I never wanted to be seen as somebody who says Antoine Dupont has been ruled out with an ACL injury for 9 months. The scrum half sustained this against Ireland, and this, I never want to just talk like that in that monotone kind of voice. I think it's really important that, you know, if you have a belief, you find your own unique way of saying it. And sometimes it means you have to say things that people disagree with, right? And sometimes it gets you in trouble if you end up like trash talking somebody or whatever. But, and I'm not saying trash talk people, like that's not an important part of the job whatsoever.
Yeah.
But I think finding your own tone is the most important thing. You can't afford to exercise your ego on this. You know, it's not about putting your own face on the thumbnail and going, oh yeah, here's me looking shocked so people think I've got a personality. Instead, let your analysis and everything do the talking. You know, it is just like, let the rugby speak for itself, because the rugby is brilliant, right? And this is exclusively in rugby. I couldn't tell you how to be a content creator in any other form of media in the world, but the rugby itself will speak, and it's finding your own way of making that engaging and interesting that you have. And yeah, don't follow the script that the media tells you to follow. You know, don't be one of those kind of, I guess, writers or whatever who is monotone. Everybody consumes rugby in a different way, and it's like, what is yours? Because the way that you'll watch rugby is so different from the way that I'll watch rugby, you know, and the way that we'll think about it and our perspectives on it and what we think is a good thing will be slightly different. And that's why it's great having conversations like this one, right? It's because, like, we will learn a lot from each other on how we each consume the game, and that's how you make your own platform off it. It's like, it is just let somebody crawl inside what your rugby brain is and what makes that unique, because everyone's is different and special in its own way, as cringe as that sounds.
Well, rugby is a subjective sport. It's not
It is.
athletics where you get a time at the end of the day, like, and that person progresses to the next round. That's the difficult thing about a lot of players coming up through the ranks when it comes to trials and selection. Is that
Yeah.
rugby is a subjective sport, so sometimes
Bang on.
an incredibly biased sport when it comes to selection at a young age. But you have an opinion. You have a personality. You've got to let it come through 100%. Like, no one wants to hear the same stuff regurgitated over and over again. You have a spin on things. Most importantly, in that conversation is, yeah, no need to start hating on everyone. That is never a way to, you should
100%.
want to grow. It's definitely a way you can grow 100%, because a hate is so engaging for so many people. People love to hate, but that's not the world we want to live in. So I definitely wouldn't recommend that, but definitely put your own spin on things.
Yeah.
100% with you on that.
Yeah.
Okay, Will, we know you've watched a shed load of rugby, potentially, arguably, possibly the most rugby of anyone ever of all time. So you've got a bit of a catalogue up there, and in that catalogue, there's a shed load of games. So I want to know what your favourite game of all time is. Not because of the stakes of the game, like a World Cup final, not because of the atmosphere, because you were there, but technically, analytically, what game do you enjoy watching the most from the past?
I kind of hold. Okay, I've got a couple of answers here, if that's all right.
That's fine.
The France v South Africa quarterfinal in 2023, that was incredible because it was two teams playing completely different style of rugby. An insanely high standard. The 2022 Women's World Cup final between England and New Zealand, again, very similar, like insanely fast-paced New Zealand team, like trying to score tries out wide, compared to an England team mauling through the middle and like both playing an insanely high standard. And for a personal bias one, I will go with Wales beating England 28-25 in the 2015 World Cup. That was a personal favourite, so maybe slightly less technical, but I've given you two more technical ones there, so let me have this one for free.
That's fine by me. I mean, a horrible day at the office for anyone wearing the rose, but arguably, possibly the last good day for Wales. So we'll take that one
It's
straight
true.
to the bank.
It's true.
Okay, and on that theme, I know you love Wales, I know you love Welsh sides, but who is the team that you enjoy watching the most on a consistent basis? Again, analytically speaking.
We've mentioned a fair bit of like the current Canadian women's team that are just incredible. Like, I've never seen a rugby team that play that fast before. They have the quickest ruck speed of any team in the history of international rugby. So them at the moment, as well as like the French men's team, I love them. I love the way that they kick to open up like attacking opportunities. And they have so many like complete rapiers in that team. Looking at the likes of Ramos, looking at Dupont, looking at Eldry and Untamak, and like there's so many of them. Like it could go on. So I think there's one from the men's game, one from the women's game. So they're the two that I would look into personally.
Yeah, and you mentioned two bits there around the ruck and kicking, and I think they're two of the most misunderstood parts of rugby. I genuinely think the ruck is, this is something that I've delved into in way too much detail in my rugby mind palace, about the ruck being the cornerstone to everything in rugby. I don't think people genuinely understand how significant ruck speed actually is. Do you want to talk us through the significance?
Yeah, sure. I think it's so funny because this comes down to like under nines rugby or whatever, like the lowest levels all the way up to the top. I remember when I was doing my first coaching course, somebody saying like, and don't get me wrong, there's a lot of stuff in there that would have gone straight in one ear and out the other. But one thing that was said that was really, really useful, which was that the quickest way of moving forward in rugby is to kick the ball up the field, right? But that's not the most controlled. After that, it's running straight forward. After that, it's like offloading around people. After that, it's leg drive and maul and whatever. Like, these are all the different ways of getting around people. And after that, I guess at the bottom of the list is placing the ball on the floor when you've been tackled for somebody to then ruck over and somebody else to then play it away. And we did a video on this basically about like the tiny little offloads and the way that people try and avoid the ruck altogether. A lot of it is kind of like based around Ben Ryan's Fiji Sevens team of 2016, who had this tactic of like, keep the ball off the floor. Do not get tackled. Make sure you offload it. It's worth the risk in sevens if you're Fijian and you have those insane genes.
Yeah.
And that now comes up to, you look at like, again, like the French men are brilliant at this, always making sure their groundwork's really good to try and mitigate that ruck from essentially happening. Something that Canada do now to bring that down, so Canada women this is, that they do so well to keep this ruck speed down, is they sometimes will just place the ball straight into the scrum half's hands rather than putting it on the floor for her to pick up. And she's extremely good at this, Justine Pelletier, they're 9. And they just put the ball straight into her hands, like off the floor. They're allowed to do that, it doesn't count as holding on. It doesn't say in the laws that they have to put it specifically on the floor. It just says they have to present it back. So yeah, in terms of ruck speed, like essentially a ruck is, it's the most common thing to happen after a tackle, but also it is the slowest way of progressing the ball forward. So the theory is, the quicker that is, the harder the defence are going to have to move around the park, the more catching up they're going to have to do, the more tired they get, the more space emerges.
100%. And that is the fascinating thing about shape in rugby. Everyone loves shape, 1-3-3-1, all these different ways of managing your forwards around the pitch so that you're all on the same page. But the whole entire point of doing that is so that you're one step ahead of the defence. But imagine if every time you get tackled and there's a breakdown, you just wait the entire time for the defence to then line up opposite you and then make the tackles. At that point, there's almost no point in having any shape because it's so obvious what you're about to go and do. Of course, it then depends on how well you're splitting defenders within your attacking shape. But at the same time, if you can speed up that process of the defence having to get back on side and you can move the ball away before they even do it, then you've got already an advantage to play rugby on top. That's what I say shape's all about. Shape is just a means of creating rugby situations, creating 3v2s, creating 4v3s. All these different situations that then boil down to a 2v1 pass are created right upstream by your shape, then your tactics.
Structures create unstructure, isn't it? It's that thing Eddie Jones always bangs on about.
And when you actually understand it, it makes so much sense. You have structure to create those opportunities. So you have a short side and all these different things to go and play through 100%. And I remember at school even, we got taught, I don't suppose it was probably inspired by the Fiji team, but we were all about lightning quick ball. This is at Beach and Cliff School in Bath when I was part of the Ace League program back there. But our coach, Ryan Davies, we used to play a game where the ball wouldn't touch the floor. You go through your presentation process. You'd fall on your chest, you'd snap back, but then you'd lift the ball up to the scrum half. And our scrum half would almost play like off the back of a line out when it's thrown off the top. They'd play and be able to move the ball straight away. It just saves that split second of being able to stay on top. And that's a real nausey point about rugby, is the ruck is the cornerstone to the success of any attacking team. But what's something else? What's a guilty pleasure of yours that you love to nause over? And don't hold back, because I know you're a nausey bloke. I know you love it. But what's something that you think that if people understood better in rugby would help them and enjoy watching the game more?
100% kicking tactics and like kicking battles as well. Like there's so many people who will just see someone drop into the pocket or the caterpillar setting up and go, oh no, you're doing a kick here. No, kicking battles are like one of the most interesting parts of rugby. Essentially, it turns this mental sport where you've got like 120 kg blokes or like men or women like running at each other and trying to smash each other and kill each other, and suddenly it turns into a game of chess. And I love that. I think it's insane that suddenly like it's become such a game of strategy. And box kicking, I think, is a really interesting thing that people often talk down upon. Again, there will be a video about this at some point soon, but essentially like the opportunity to get a winger under the ball and advance up the field from there, that I think is a really interesting thing in itself. But also, as I say, kicking battles. So looking at when you kick the ball, can you get it to bounce in the opposition backfield? How much time does that grant your chasers to get in their faces to put a bit of pressure on the response that then allows you to make a net gain of 20 odd meters? And then you can kick it back and pile the pressure on. Or you can run it back, again, as the French men's team love to do, and see if you can get around defenders and create these unstructured scenarios that were on about a minute ago. There was a game that happened in the summer between England and Argentina where in the last 10 minutes, every time England had the ball, Jack Van Poortvliet stuck it in the air and piled the pressure on Argentina. And a lot of people said, oh, this is the boring way of playing the game or whatever. Oh, I actually did a video on this on our second channel, which I didn't look at the game as a whole. I just looked at the last 15 minutes and how Jack Van Poortvliet managed it and what led to him scoring the winning try in the end, because he'd squeezed Argentina so hard into a corner where they could just hit it back at England and they couldn't actually kick tactically anymore because England were putting them in really difficult corners. So all they could do was just hit it and try and get it off the pitch. And at that point, if you're England, you're going, brilliant, we've made it 50 metres up the pitch because we have just tactically kicked a few times. And that is so much more cost effective, let's say, in terms of your energy than trying to hammer on the door of an attack for 25 phases and not making any yardage and losing the ball. You know, it is so calculated and I just love watching them.
It's not that kicking is boring. You just don't understand it. That's the problem here.
Say it louder for the people at the back.
That's the point of what I try and do with Level Up, and the same with you guys at Squidge. It's that I'm trying to help educate people so that they can watch the game more intelligently and therefore understand it better. And that's ultimately going to make you enjoy watching the game a whole lot more. And that's the thing about kicking, that I think, similar to the stat you had about the majority of people who don't like watching the women's game or say that it's bad, actually are people who haven't watched the game. Because the people who hate on kicking, I think, are the people who spend most of their time eye rolling when someone kicks the ball. So they're not actually watching it. They don't actually understand because they're too busy rolling their eyes.
I don't know if you do this. Do you do this thing where when a kicking battle starts, do you go a bit closer to the screen and go like, oh, I want to see what happens here. I'm trying to pay attention now.
Exactly.
Lock in.
100%, mate. 100%. And don't get me wrong, there are bad times to kick a ball. And I have been so guilty of being in the opposition 22, putting a grubber in behind and then just booting it 50 metres up the pitch.
Been there,
I've
done that.
I've done it. I hold my hands up. But the process that I follow to make watching kicking battles interesting is that all you have to do is take note of where that first initial kick took place. Once you know that spot on the pitch, you have to remember it. You have to stay engaged and watch it. Secondly, watch for if the ball bounces. If it bounces, you don't understand how much of a win that is for you.
Yes.
Because if they have to turn around, even better, they then have to spend all that time going back and picking up the ball. All that time you're spending coming forwards. And not only are they having to go back and spend that time getting the ball, but also the perceived pressure increases as you get closer to charging them down. They can't come further up the pitch to then kick back to you. So take note if the ball bounces, because that's a real significant thing. But regardless, then keep a track of where they're kicking the ball back to. And so on and so forth until the final kick takes place, where the ball then becomes dead, whether it's a knock-on, whether it's the first ruck that then leads to another kick potentially, or whether the ball goes out. And that is the fun game of it. It is fun, I promise. I swear it's fun.
Yeah.
Because you then realise, oh my God, they've just made 50 metres from this kick battle. If you remember where the first one took place, even better if they get the ball back. And that's how you make kicking fun, in my opinion. It's just tracing the ball. Of course, there are boring times, and I remember England getting booed for box kicking too much. In box kicking, it slows the game down, arguably. and you can't just put a quota on it. You can't just say that they can't box kick more than 5 times in a game.
Yeah.
So that'd be an interesting way to come around that. I think what they're trying to do around the ruck will really speed up the pace of the box kick, potentially. Yeah, trying to manage that is a whole different conversation, but that is how you make in-game kicking far more enjoyable to watch, I think.
100% agreed. And yeah, I mean, you raised a point about the box kick. I think the slow bit is the setup of the box kick, but once again, like, you know, it's much quicker than when the ball's off the pitch, for example, you know. So, you know, it can be frustrating, I get that, but I guess it's a case of sticking with it because you eventually learn to kind of not notice it, you know, because it takes 4 or 5 seconds out of the game. And I think referees are increasingly very good at speeding them up and saying, like, I really like the innovation they had where they tell the scrum off when there's 2 seconds to go until they're going to turn them over. And like a lot of referees do actually turn them over now, which I am in favour of, except the scrum half has never done anything wrong in their entire life and they are perfect, every single one of them. So, you know.
It's a classic. Now, I remember when, I think it might have been Luke Pearce, started counting down the breakdowns from 5. And then you realise, the first thought is, that's a brilliant idea. It's going to speed the game up for sure. Then you realise you're essentially a starter marshal at a sprint race for the 100 metres for the second row to go and put a shed load of pressure on this poor scrum half who's trying to get the ball away. But yeah, I think that's the way to go around things. But regardless, Will, we covered off so much stuff there about the good of rugby, all the things that are going well with the marketing space, all the negative things around licensing. And honestly, I think the only question that really remains, mate, is who is your GOAT? Who is your greatest of all-time player ever? And who is your current GOAT at the moment?
That's good because I had 2 answers and they are both current players, so I can separate them there. So for me, the GOAT, I would say, is Antoine Dupont. For me, he's my favourite rugby player of all time. And I've never seen a rugby player like him. You can put him in virtually any position on the rugby pitch and he will do a really good job. He's insanely strong. He's insanely fast. He can kick 50 plus metres off both feet. His passing and offloading skills are ludicrous. He weirdly always tops like carrying stats as a scrum half, which is incredible. There was something that happened before the Men's Six Nations this year where they asked all of the captains, like, if you could have one skill from another captain, what would you have? And Antoine Dupont is very charming where he goes, I would take the height of Maro Itoje. And every other captain named a different skill of Antoine Dupont. Like I think it was Itoje said his speed, Michele Lamoureux said his strength, Caelan Doris said his offloading, Jack Morgan said his vision, and then Rory Darge said, like, I don't know, his kicking ability or something like that. Like, all of them had like a different skill that they attributed to him as like his best attribute of his game. So for me, it's Antoine Dupont. I think the one thing that he doesn't have is a World Cup, and he says that himself. Like, he says he doesn't feel comfortable people calling him the GOAT because he's not won a World Cup. And I think anybody who would say Eben Etzebeth has a good point, because as a forward, a lot of the stuff he does is underappreciated and he's maximised what a second row has to do. However, the other player that I would say is like the current one who is on their way to GOAT status is Sophie de Goody, who is unbelievable, who is the top line-out taker in the World Cup that is, as we record, going on, and also is a 70+% goal kicker. And she is absolutely incredible. She's got player of the match in 3 out of 5 games of this World Cup. And aside from Dupont, I don't think I've seen a more talented rugby player, like, basically in my life, because her offloading, her line break kind of ability, try scoring, as well as like having a great kicking game. She is a second row. Bear in mind, she's a second row / number 8 and a brilliant kicker. Such an unbelievable skill set, and honestly, like, you can build an entire team around her. And I'm not saying Canada have done that, because I don't think they necessarily have, but I think they built this game plan knowing that they have her to fall back on. And she's only 26 years old, and Dupont, I think, is 28 now. So the two of them have such long careers still ahead of them, and yeah, the two of those are like two of the like absolute like GOAT level players in terms of sheer talents as rugby players. Obviously, in terms of legacy, you've got to look at the Jonah Lomus and players like that who have revolutionised the game, who are unreplicatable, but those are the two that certainly at this moment in time that I would lean on.
Crazy. They've not even finished their careers yet, and they're already up in
not
these
even in their 30s. Yeah.
Wild. And I'm with you on the Antoine Dupont point. I think he is the best player of all time. I can't name a skill the bloke can't do. But if I was to pick one of his skills from what you just told me, it's going to be unreal chat. That is a great bit of banter. having the heart of Marrakesh. And what a humble brag that is. Like, I don't want any of their skills. Oh, other than being 6'5", that might be
Yeah.
nice. But
Yeah.
even still, like, he can't pick a skill because he's got them all.
It was so funny looking at a video like that and just saying, like, Antoine Dupont just said, I wish I was a little bit taller, and everyone else said, I wish I was a baller. It was incredible. But yeah,
Unreal
with that as
chat.
well, I think the word greatest does a lot of carrying here, because I think he's the best player of all time, the way that you just said it. You said he's the best. Greatest is a little bit different because there's players who've won multiple World Cups and so on. I think there's a bit of semantics going on there. Like, greatest probably leans a little bit more to an Etzebet or someone like that. But
yeah, greatest is more holistic, including like influence over the game of rugby. That's a real good point, actually. Yeah, because that's the way I see it in my head. I think he's the best player. The best rugby player.
He's the
in
boat,
terms of
at least.
The boat. That's why he's the boat. Yeah, you're so right. Because that's what everyone says about Antoine Dupont, is that he hasn't played overseas. Like, he doesn't play anywhere else outside France. So how can he be great? And I'm like, yeah, fair play. Stick him anywhere. I reckon he'll do a job.
Yeah,
like, perhaps he's the best. So
he played for Toulouse against the, I want to say, Sharks last year and absolutely trounced them. And they don't seem to bring that up. But hey ho.
Yeah, it's fascinating how people hold different perspectives to suit their own certain opinions. Like people who say that they hate kicking but love watching France play. Sorry?
Yeah.
They kick the most out of any team in international rugby, right?
100%. Yeah. And
so
they use that to open
sense.
up their attack. And that's what that proves why it's essential.
Literally, like, going back to that point, it is fascinating how people can say that they hate kicking but love watching France for their flair. It's the balance of both. That is a beautiful game. The beautiful game of rugby union that we so enjoy. But the one thing that I don't know I can get on board with is seeing a goal kicker in line-out lifters. I mean, I'm overthinking everything in my goal kicking process, and I don't even have lifters on. How on earth is she reaching full extension in her swing? Because those things, it just makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable watching her kicking those.
She's superhuman. That's why.
Too right. Oh, brilliant stuff. Well, I appreciate your time. Give us a shout out for what you guys got coming up next. What can people get involved with? How can they support the channel? And what are you ultimately trying to achieve with Squidge Rugby? Again, rather than just being the best YouTube channel, as the greatest YouTube channel. What's your overall influence looking to be?
Very good. Yeah, so you can find us Squidge Rugby on YouTube. Coming up, so once this World Cup is done, we've got a couple of little projects around the corner. As I say, we've got that box kicking one, which you now have as an exclusive. Congratulations. And then we have the Autumn Internationals coming up after that. And the rugby never ends. It's like that David Mitchell meme of like, the football will never stop. They will never define who has finally won the football. Like, that is very much our world at this point. But yeah, in terms of what we're trying to achieve, I would actually say the thing that I most want to glorify is rugby nerds are a good thing. Like, it's good to have them about. There's this, again, a great story that Robbie tells about when he was in the changing room of his rugby team when he was like 15 years old. And it was the Rugby World Cup 2011, and Argentina had just beaten Scotland that morning, like before he'd gone, because the time zones were obviously, it was in New Zealand, so it was really early. And somebody brought up, like, oh yeah, Argentina's winning try in that game. And Robbie goes, oh yeah, Lucas Morosino, what a try that was. And they all went, what? How do you know who that is? And I've had a lot of those moments myself, like growing up around, people in rugby clubs and my old rugby club, whatever. There was a few people who kind of like frowned upon me. It was like, what are you on about that for, you nerd? And it's like, well, now, if you're enough of a rugby nerd, you will do it as your job, and have a YouTube channel, carve a career out of it. So I think, the main thing that I want to achieve in doing what I do with Squidge Rugby is glorifying the rugby nerd and making sure they know that there are more people out there like them, and that it is a great thing to have ball knowledge.
Ball knowledge indeed, mate. And I've got to send you one of these t-shirts, because on the back of them, my whole brand with Level Up Rugby is all about being for the Nauses. For those people who bloody love ruggers and aren't afraid to chat into the night, as we've been doing so far this evening. I'll send one for you and your brother to enjoy, because we are both rugby Nauses. And I've got to make my own shout out here to a rugby Nause friend of mine, because I've got a similar story. I turned up to my first day at my old job before I then quit that. And I was greeted by possibly someone who might even rival you as a rugby Nause. And the first conversation we ever had, bearing in mind I'd never met the bloke before, was about how Luke McLean used to stand at fly half in defensive lines and let Luciano Olquera go to fullback position. And the
Yeah.
first time that was ever done was in like the 2013 Six Nations. And from that point, we were best friends forever. So shout out to you, Harrison Scott, you absolute legend.
All good
Thank you
friendships
so much.
start with chats about Luke McLean. I love it.
Indeed, they do. And yeah, I really appreciate your time, Will. Thank you so much for sharing all your
Likewise, brother.
insight.
Thank you.
The passion is clear, and I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing your wisdom and all that database of information. We could have probably chatted for another 2 hours, but
Oh, yeah,
we'll
we
let you
would have
guys
done.
get back to your days. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Talking Ruggers. I've been your host, OJ. Will, thank you so much for coming on. We'll
Thanks
see you
for
guys
having
in
me,
the next
OJ.
one.
Great fun.